Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to the last afternoon of Bad Camp. I hope everyone has had a fantastic time at the camp this week. I know that I have. I am currently existing on waffles and coffee, but that's not a bad way to go. So, thanks for coming out today. We are here to talk about friendly stalking, which is, seasonally appropriate. So we are going to focus on how to not be creepy when it comes to getting insights about your users, their behaviors on your site, and what they are looking for. One thing I wanted to touch base on just really quick by show of hands. Who here works in user experience strategy or content strategy, or is more actually on kind of the analyzing side of the data? Okay, a couple people. And how many folks are more on the side of needing to implement these solutions for their internal teams or their clients? Okay, great. Of those of you in charge of implementation, is anyone here managing both the Drupal site and actually the analytics side as well in terms of configuration? Okay, cool. Great. Well, let's get going then. Awkward picture of me. My name is kwhite. I am the Director of Engineering at Canopy Studios. We are a digital agency focused on clients who are making an impact, doing everything from upfront user strategy work all the way through design, development, production, and then sort of the life cycle, iteration, and maintenance of your site through our support department. That is my Twitter handle. So feel free to hit me up if you have questions after this that we don't get to, or you want to talk about something more in depth. I am always happy to discuss. Happy Halloween. I had so much fun walking around this weekend seeing all the kids, I call them kids, which is totally not fair of me, all the Berkeley students out in their crazy Halloween costumes. Friday night, last night, super fun. Given the time of year, we're going to embrace the creepy, crawly, spooky aspects of our season and talk about tracking. On the agenda today, we're going to talk a little bit about why these user insights matter, what part they play in our approach to website design and development. We're going to focus on the what of the highest impact tools that we use internally when it comes to conversion rate optimization and content optimization for sites. And we'll talk a little bit about how creepy those tools may or may not be for your users. We'll also do a quick walkthrough. I don't want to call it a demo because demos are scary, but we'll do a walkthrough of kind of a sample configuration that I've put together that uses these tools and shows some example scenarios of how to maximize user insights that you can get out of the platforms. The tools we're going to focus on today are the Google Suite and a tool called HotJar, which does heat mapping. Let's set the stage a little bit. So this is a user. When we do user experience work, we want to start by quietly observing users in their natural habitat. It's like digital wildlife research. You can kind of think of it that way. When we start a project, the first thing we'll do is install these tools on existing sites to get an understanding of the status quo so that we can accurately evaluate what's working in our current scenario, what isn't working in the context of the current system, and what types of folks we're reaching as a part of our audience. But here's the thing. Users are not a fan of being tracked, as a general rule. Being watched is creepy. Digital natives have become savvy enough that they demand transparent practices. We're probably all familiar with things like GDPR, which are now codified articulations of this value system that we're really starting to see in effect in the digital landscape. When we do user research, it's easy to think about, oh, well, we just ask them questions. We'll just ask them what they're here for. And that's a solid approach, but it actually interrupts the thing they came here to do. So sometimes the information you'll get out of that is different than what you will get by sitting back and quietly observing. And it also flows into this expectation that users expect you to be able to anticipate what they need. This is becoming more and more of a factor as the web evolves. In fact, some interesting stats, because everybody loves stats. 37% of respondents to this really excellent survey that WP Engine and the Center for Generational Kinetics did back at the end of last year, 37% of respondents across all generations think that websites will recognize and adapt to the user to create a completely unique and optimal experience within 5 years. Generation Z, or iGen, if you've heard them called that, is the youngest generation. So these are people born in 1996 on down. So these are today's young adults. Of those respondents, 50% will stop visiting a website if that site does not successfully anticipate what they need, like, or want. So this starts to really highlight why these types of information architecture and content optimization things are so important if we want to keep users engaged with our sites. The users value the security that they feel on your site, which has to do with responsibly handling their information. They value authenticity when they interact with your organization. And they're looking for transparency in your practices. When it comes to ensuring that digital experiences are safe, security is a paramount concern. So everyone, 2 of the top 3 things they're most concerned about on the web are security related. 32% of those people say that blocking viruses, spyware, and some people lump some of these kinds of tools into those categories of people that are watching my actions and doing stuff with it that I don't know about, that it would make their digital experiences dramatically better not to have those things in their lives. And that 19% want to be able to transparently know when a site's untrustworthy, know what kind of trackers and beacons they're running. And we see a lot of proliferation now of tools and browsers that are working to expose a little bit more of this information in a digestible format for users. Now, the interesting pivot point here is that these younger generations are more opening to balancing the privacy with the desire for those personalized experiences. So that's great for us in this regard when it comes to trying to observe behavior and give them what they're looking for. There is this shift in their mindset to understand that it is a give and take, and that we can't help them without information in return. So it just highlights that security is not privacy, and that transparency is key. So knowing all of this, and knowing that, knowing that just getting user feedback on your site just by asking them is proactive, but kind of gets in their way, what can we find out about what they came here to do while reducing the friction that's caused by our quest for information? So the first set of tools we're going to talk about are Google tools. And I'm lumping these all into a large category. What? Oh, if I get closer to it, am I not loud enough? Okay. Is this better? Oh, awesome. All right. Sorry about that. So first category of tools we're going to talk about are the Google suite of tools. For purposes of today, this is going to include Google Analytics, it's going to include Google Tag Manager, it is going to include Search Console. And we're going to limit it to that. There are a lot of other tools out there, but these are the kind of the most relevant in the moment to what we're talking about. So what are the cool factors about Google, regardless of how you feel about this overall? They're free, and they are incredibly powerful tools for being free. They give us tremendous potential to generate insights. They have a really, really broad reach. So when you are doing benchmark research or looking at those types of parameters within Google's tools, you're pulling from an enormous pool of data in terms of how your site in your industry performs and compares to other sites. And there are a lot of tools available that let you integrate your data sources. So we all know Google's all about data, so there are a lot of ways to bring in data from your customer relationship management systems or other various tools, and you can aggregate them into reports either in Google Search in Google Data Studio if you haven't messed with that, or even within the analytics platform. So what are the creepy factors about Google tools? Nothing is actually free. We all pay to play. So they can use your content for any of their existing and future services. They can track you across other websites. And their practices and techniques may use device fingerprinting, which, while they aren't technically identifying an individual, if you've ever done any of those tests where like you can take your browser and run it through something that says, hey, can you tell who I am? They can actually probably pinpoint you down to like 95% accuracy based on how your browser's set up. So let's talk about Google Analytics. There are a few features of Google Analytics we're going to discuss today, and then we're going to look at how to implement them on the Drupal side. The first are our user demographics. So if you've never played with demographic reporting in Google Analytics, it's fascinating. There's a toggle you can turn on that will basically allow you to analyze your traffic by dimensions that include affinities, so areas of interest or things that they're in market for, as well as more traditional statistics such as age, gender. So it really can help you identify who your site is reaching, your high-value market segments, and give you an idea of where and how to tailor your messaging and your content to the users that are converting the best on your site. It cannot be used with user ID tracking. If you want to do reporting on that uses user IDs, and I'll talk about user IDs in a sec, but if you want to use that, you have to use this separately, because again, Google actually doesn't want you to get too close to uniquely identifying visitors on your site. The other thing I will just highlight with this is that it does require an update to your privacy policy. So if you're going to use demographic, if you're going to collect and use demographic data, you got to let people know. The next thing to talk about is campaign tracking. And a lot of people think about campaign tracking as kind of limited to I'm doing paid advertising, but it's not. If you're sending out email newsletters or people are coming into your site from social media, there are native features and analytics you can use to track those things, but you can also set up campaign level tracking to find out how like a specific series of social media emails or social media posts did, or a specific email campaign, for example. I've mentioned dimensions, and one of the things I wanted to highlight here was you can create custom dimensions. When we get into the Drupal piece of this, I'll show you, but basically you can take Drupal values out of the data layer and create custom dimensions that will let you do things like find out how popular content in specific categories is, or do people really like one author over another? Whose posts are they reading? That kind of stuff you can create in Google Analytics using custom dimensions. You can then take all of these inputs, all of these configurations, and create audience segmentation in analytics. This will let you say, I want to look at all of my traffic data for this one group of people who are into this one kind of thing, or came from this one campaign. So it gives you the ability to really target and crystallize the story that you're seeing in your analytics reporting. I touched on this briefly. I wanted to speak to user ID integration because some people know. Has anybody heard of this? No? Okay. So user ID integration in Google Analytics is primarily used for cross-device tracking. So imagine, we all know, you have a user and they get cookied, and every hit they make against the analytics platform on their laptop, that activity is tracked in Google Analytics. Pretty chill, pretty straightforward. What if that same person were to come back on a different device? So the user ID integration gives you the ability to identify unique users. So it requires a consistent, unique identifier that can't contain any personally identifying information. It has to be random. There are lots of wrong and creepy ways to do this, but it can give you incredibly valuable insights about what the same users do on your site on their phone versus what they do on their laptop. Because we all have theoretical conversations about that, but there actually are ways that you can start to get a clearer picture of that. Another pretty cool feature of Google Analytics, if you're not using it, is site search log. So, we look a lot at inbound traffic, how people get here and like what they click on, what the hits are as they go through things. but you can actually also look at what they're typing into that query box. And you can see that as part of your analytics reporting. So you can find out what's hidden or what's missing or what the content trends are that people are looking for by looking at the search history on your site. Tied to search now from an organic standpoint, the next tool I wanted to bring up is Search Console. Who knows Google Search Console and is using Google Search Console? Okay, so this used to be called Google Webmaster Tools, if that's helpful. But Search Console, we've all probably seen this in our analytics reporting. This not provided is 95% of your search terms. Search Console helps you see that data. So it lets you look at searches that are run over secure connections. Because that's really what this means, is if they're running a Google query over HTTPS, you can't see the data without being hooked up to Search Console. And we're gonna look at kind of how that works. But Google Tag Manager is probably another one people have heard of. And I know there's a lot of debate about, do I use Google Tag Manager? Do I need Google Tag Manager? Should I just stick with analytics? I don't know. Tag Manager is like a container that will help you manage a lot of tracking. So if you are doing a whole lot of user analysis and you're running Crazy Egg and you're running HotJar and you're running GA and you're running 100 other things, tag managers will save your sanity. So I highly, highly recommend looking at them in the event that you're running a ton of tags on the site. It, of course, is deeply integrated with Google Analytics. And the thing I really love about it, the reason I recommend it to my clients, is that it makes it much, much easier to empower non-technical people to set up their own event tracking and do stuff. So it gets us out of having to get in and write scripts every time somebody wants to track something. So what about Google with Drupal? How do we use these tools in a Drupal site building context to get insights about our Drupal sites? First up is the Google Analytics module. This is pretty standard. Probably everybody in the room has seen this. It's a really easy way to implement your UA code. You can define custom dimensions and metrics for it, though, which is the really interesting part, using tokens. So you can take tokens from your site and actually track them as custom dimensions in your data layer and expose them just through the UI of the module. Or you can write custom tokens to get information that's not necessarily available, out of the box at the system level, which is huge when it comes to writing these kinds of more customized reports on the other end. I wanted to highlight that it actually does, and this is one of the things I made sure of prior to this talk, that it provides Google site tag support. You'll probably notice there's a whole bunch of different Google Analytics scripts out there in the wild, and some are really old and some are really modern. gtag.js is the most modern version, and if you're going to do any cross-domain type tracking, so you've got several top-level domains and you want to be able to see how traffic interplays between them, you will need to be running the most recent version of this code, which is supported by this module, which is great. There's also the Google Tag Manager. You can do custom dimensions and values using the data layer module in addition to this, which will automatically expose features of your content types on that data layer so you can access them. You do have to, if you want to do anything more custom than that, though, you're going to end up having to hook into the code. So in some ways, the Google Analytics module is a little more plug and play, but this is going to ultimately give you more latitude if you have to do something that's a little more sophisticated. A lot of people, yeah. You can, as long as your tag manager isn't also running your analytics code. So personally, I always recommend running analytics through tag manager, but you can do a scenario where that script lives outside of the tag manager and there's just other stuff that's in. I do want to point out that a lot of us, when you go to install Search Console on your site, you're going to have to verify that you own your site. One of the ways through which you can do that is verify your analytics profile, verify your tag manager profile, use a meta tag. There's some other things. If you are using the Google Tag Manager Drupal module, though, tag manager verification will fail. So just know that up front, because where it hooks into the source code order isn't what Google's looking for. Not a huge deal, but I'll save you 2 minutes of pain. The data layer module, which I mentioned, which works with Tag Manager, exposes this metadata out of the box. So there's less configuration for you to do, but you can continue to add custom dimensions and values with your API. So, and then we can configure them on the other end. So that's Google. A lot of tools, and they're super powerful in terms of getting really targeted data about your users. HotJar is the next one I want to talk about. Who's used HotJar? Okay, so HotJar is super cool. You can basically think of it as your site as a canvas for user interaction, and HotJar is going to paint data visualization on top of that canvas so that you can see how people are actually interacting with your site kind of beyond the pointy clicky stuff. It's free. It has a free tier. It's a limited number of views, but you can actually install this now and play with it and experiment. It will offer individual user session recordings, which is awesome. Because so many times, you know, when we do user research, it's the whole like, I'm going to go sit there and I'm going to look over your shoulder while you click on a bunch of things. You can avoid that and actually get this stuff recorded through HotJar, which is awesome. And it also offers surveys and funnel analysis and feedback forms and this kind of stuff, which we're not going to get into for purposes of today, but definitely check it out if those are things that you think will be of value to you. So what are the creep factors then with HotJar? It's actually not too creepy. I was super excited to see this. I went and combed their privacy policy, which was, you know, kind of some light reading for my afternoon. But they are very conscientious in their data collection and maintenance practices. So they, when they're doing user recordings, all keystrokes and everything are suppressed. So there's no passwords or anything that's available via a user session recording. They don't keep data backups more than 365 days. They are GDPR compliant, and users can actually go to HotJar's site and opt out, at which point HotJar tracking, you know, anywhere will not fire for them. So you can give them the ability to, you know, from your privacy practices, link out and just turn it off everywhere if that's what they want to do. So this is what a heat map actually looks like. This is a visual representation of users' interactions. So this is, the one that we are looking at here is an example of a click tracking heat map. So you can see that second navigation item is the most popular item for clicks on the page. That's where everybody goes. And the more, you know, from a sample size perspective, the more data you get into the system, the more accurate these projections are going to be. There are 3 types of heat maps that you can use within HotJar. Clicking is one of them. There's also a movement tracking heat map, so where people hover and spend time on the page. And it's also got a scrolling heat map. So you can see, for example, oh my gosh, we went to this one-page site and nobody scrolls further than 40% of the way down the page, for example. Hopefully that's not happening to you. But there's heat maps that can help show you those kinds of scroll patterns as well. The other thing we've touched on briefly, but I wanted to kind of show, is that you'll have session recordings. So this will be a video that plays of a single user's interaction with your website. It follows clicks through the system. So you'll see where they hover, where they click, what they, you know, where they scroll. You'll see the entirety of their interaction with your content for the entire session. So it's super cool. What about HotJar and Drupal? Well, as you might expect, there is a HotJar module. It looks about like you'd expect it to. You plop in a code, you tell it what pages you want it to be on or what pages you don't want it to be on, and you're done. Ultimately, again, this is the kind of thing I recommend running through a tag manager. But if you don't want to use a tag manager, or you're anti-Google, or whatever it is, then there is an option to get this on your site now today without having to do any extra configuration. Okay. So let's put this together. This is where I am going to turn this mic so I can get to my browser. Am I doing on time? I'm actually okay. All right, good. All right, I need to move this here. This is gonna be interesting. Okay, I'm gonna see if I can change my display settings so I can actually see this thing. Read these for a minute. Okay, great. Good, good, good. So here is my beautiful and probably very familiar demo site. What I've done on this is I've gone through and created a sample Drupal installation, and we're going to look at the way that I have configured things in terms of Search Console, Tag Manager, Analytics on Drupal, okay? So the first thing, because there's a lot of steps in this process, and it can be really weird trying to get things done in the right order. So the very first thing I actually would recommend looking at and doing is just setting up the individual tools. So you go into Tag Manager, you're going to create, your container, and you're just going to, I'm going to get to the admin settings here real quick. It'll give you the default code in the admin settings for this tag container, okay? You grab those, where is it? I'm not going to dig around for it. Here's your account ID. So when you're on the Drupal side, you install the Tag Manager module, you drop in that internet is slow. You're going to drop in your Tag Manager ID. Right now I'm configuring it to just work on everything, okay? So that gets dropped in there. Great. Okay, well that was easy. So then we do the same thing on Google Analytics. We go ahead and we set up our account. I will say, just as a PSA, when you're doing analytics, if you're setting up a fresh account with analytics, I highly recommend creating reporting views that are not your master data view, because once you filter it out, you can't get it back. So whenever I set up a new Google Analytics account, I make sure that I create a master reporting view, the raw data view, the master reporting view, and then a test view that I can use in kind of live data mode to make sure that configuration changes I want to make are actually doing what I think they're doing. So I do recommend taking that approach when you're setting this kind of stuff up. So you're going to set up your Google Analytics account, and again, you'll get that snippet of code, right, that contains your ID. At this point, you could take that ID, you could drop it in the Analytics module if you wanted to use it that way, or you can drop it in Tag Manager, which is actually how I have this configured. So when you're in here, you'll see that we have tags. And what's very, very cool about this interface with Google is it actually, again, this is that non-technical users, there's a whole bunch of stuff out of the box that pretty much all you have to do is say, oh, hey, I want to use a Google Analytics tag, Classic, or I want to use HotJar, and you can just drop in your ID, and you're done. So it's really handy for enabling other people in your organization to manage this stuff instead of you. So what I have done is set up just a variable that contains my Google Analytics configuration, and it references those settings, and it just fires on all pages. So okay, great. Now we've got Tag Manager on the site through Drupal. We've got Analytics on the site through Tag Manager. Cool. What is the next thing? In Analytics, under your admin settings, over here under your view settings, is where you can say you want to do site search tracking. So we've got query parameters here, and you just put in the query param that contains your search query. And at that point, Google Analytics is going to start tracking anything that's on that parameter as site search. So okay, that gets us the search logging. The Search Console stuff is also kind of buried in here in our, see if I can even remember where it is today. Huh? Oh, yeah, sure, sorry. Thank you. Okay. I'm trying to remember where the heck I put where the setting is. I should know this today, and I don't. Search Console lives under, I believe it's under here. Yeah? All right, I will find this and I will update it. But I don't want to sit here and linger. This is the danger of demos, right? So Search Console, basically, if you come in, you can actually do it this way, which is how I did it, which is why I'm not finding the value immediately. If you come in here and you go into your acquisition settings, there's a Search Console link here, okay? The Search Console link actually, if you don't have it configured, it will give you a prompt to go out and configure it. So that's my cheater's way because I can't remember where it is in the session variables. So there you go. So once you have that hooked up, then you'll actually be able to start getting organic search term data from Search Console that you're not able to see by default in Linux. So that's where you set that one up. The demographic stuff is going to be here under your audiences. There's a demographics report. And again, you'll come in here, and where I actually have a demographics overview screen, what you're going to have is a prompt that says, okay, turn this on, and remember, update your stuff if you're going to turn this on. That's where it lives, is underneath your audience settings. Okay? I went ahead and set up one custom segment, or excuse me, a segment that was based on a custom dimension. So I wanted to go ahead and show where those are, how that works. I swear, settings are not my friend today. Property settings. Is that where they are? Oh wait, Lord. Here they go, custom definitions, custom dimensions, okay? So we come in here, and this is where it starts to get a little bit weird. So we're gonna create a customized dimension, and we gotta do it over here first, so that it'll assign an index number to whatever it is you wanna track. So I've just set this up as author. Now this doesn't do anything. It just creates the container for that, okay? When we then go back over into the Drupal side, and into the data layer module, we can configure things for actually pulling those variables in and assigning them. So let me see if I can remember where this is. I did this really fast the other day. All right, you know what? I needed to script my demo. This is why I don't do demos, so I apologize. That I can try to like fumble around and show it to you later. So I apologize, because I don't want to sit up here and like pointy clicking and like waste your time. So, but basically you come in and in the data layer settings, you can go ahead and say, I want to set author to be the node ID. Or, excuse me, to be the author on your node, okay? Oops. So once that is set up, and we're actually tracking data on the Drupal side for that, then we can come back into analytics and actually create reports that use those dimensions. Which I've done up here. You can see in customization and custom reports, I've got a report by author popularity that will then take all of my test data and show me what articles by what people are clicking on, okay? So that gives me an idea of who's producing popular content. The way that this works, if you wanna go ahead and edit a report, right? And I didn't have a ton of test data, so I didn't do anything with segmentation this time around. But you'll see here, we have author popularity, we set up a report tab. All we're gonna do is add a dimension to this dimension drill down, and we're gonna select our custom dimension of author. So the power of custom reporting in Google Analytics is it lets you use your custom dimensions as primary dimensions, where the built-in reports for analytics are not gonna let you do that. They'll let you use them as secondary dimensions, but not as primary ones. So that's that. So all of this leads me to ask the question of how creepy are you? So when you're using all of these tracking beacons on your site, how are you respecting your user data privacy? So when you do your implementation, go ahead and test it with screen readers, because I've seen issues with implementations where not all of these tools are created equal. So you'll have partner tools that have accessibility issues in terms of people's ability to interact with their, where they are blocked because of script loading issues or things like that. So it's important to keep that in mind and follow general script best practices when it comes to implementation of those tools. Likewise, we already talked about how a lot of people don't like to be tracked. And one of my personal pet peeves is when I go to websites and the whole page won't load because I won't turn on tracking. So I highly, highly recommend when you're doing these kinds of implementations that you test with that ad blocker enabled. So, I know that I, at least, and a lot of developers I know, tend to have to force ourselves to turn those kinds of things off when we test, but it's important to also turn it back on or run things, in a private mode that allows you to make sure that your site will actually load if somebody is blocking that kind of traffic. And to that point, site functionality should not be affected by tracking. I find it hilarious how much this is an issue. It's like I can't complete an e-commerce conversion because I don't want to allow tracking. Or the site search on Target doesn't work because I don't want to enable tracking. So really, stop and think about how these kinds of personal decisions can affect the functionality, and just don't just make an assumption that everybody's going to be on board with it. Also consider the performance of your page and only track what you need. I will frequently see clients come in with like 12 different trackers that they're running on their site at one time, which is going to slow things down enormously, and really think about the data, the value of the data that they're providing, whether they are current. Like, take the time to audit them every now and then, and only keep what you need. Finally, in terms of thinking about how creepy you are, really look at your data privacy and your policies. Be transparent about the trackers that you're using and why you're using them. And again, some of these are driven by kind of GDPR parameters. You'll start seeing this kind of thing a lot, but use like simple language that's easy for people to understand, so that it's not legalese that is opaque and confusing. And then with regards to all of the data you capture about people, make sure that you're only keeping what you need as long as you need it. So, and this applies to pretty much anything, but think about expiring that data. If you're logging things within the Drupal database, think about expiring that data. What does it look like? I mean, once you've done your analysis on these things, it's probably best to let some things go. Not really so much in the analytics or heap mapping that we've talked about today, but in other tools that you may be using or ways you may be using your system. And then you should always give users the option to decline to participate. We've all seen this a lot lately, like with the cookie pop-ups, right? Proliferation of cookie pop-ups. Give people the option to decline to participate in being tracked and make it easy for them to get out. So if clicking the X, technically, if clicking the X on that cookie box means I agreed, I should have to just click an X in order to not agree. So I think a lot of people have a tendency to make it hard to get back out. It's like a newspaper subscription, right? Where you can subscribe on the website, but you got to call somebody to get back out of it. So again, part of the authenticity and the transparency, I would encourage you to think about ways to make it easy for people to get back out. And my final PSA is that you are just as creepy as your partners. So not all of these tools are created equal. And as we mentioned, a few things are truly free. We all kind of pay to play, even with the free tools that we use every day, like your Facebooks, as we all know. So make sure that you have read the fine print of the tools that you choose to use, and that your privacy policies that you are sharing with your users reflect those. And that's all I've got. Slides are at this link. Again, that's me on Twitter, so feel free to reach out. I will be happy to record you a demo and send it over. So, here you go. Any questions, concerns, thoughts? I know this can be a really touchy topic, so I think it's good to look at how powerful it can be, but also how it can be kind of abused. So, yeah. In the back.
Do you have any recommendations on cross-site tracking?
Do I have recommendations on cross-site tracking? Yes. Huh?
Device.
Cross-device tracking. So we don't do a lot of it. User ID is like the sanctioned way to manage that. And Google, of course, has a ton of good documentation about getting that in place. Their one big thing with it is, like I said, when you want to do cross-device tracking, you have to set it up in its own separate view, and it's got to be isolated from any kind of any kind of demographics that would make it easy to identify an individual session. Other questions? Yeah.
For HotJar, does it track scrolls from anchor links?
Does it track scrolls from anchor links, was the question with HotJar. That's a really good question. You would see that in user session recordings, but I think that the clicking on the anchor links, it would log it as a browser scroll. Other thoughts, questions? Okay. Thanks for your time, y'all. Have a great afternoon.